All right, in this video, I will talk about the chemosenses and a couple other senses that I'd like you to be familiar with. One other thing that I'd like to mention is that your book talks a fair amount about the Gestalt principles of perception. I'd like you to study those. I will not be talking about those in these recorded lectures, however. So we talked about hearing in the last video. The next two senses I want to talk about, Next two senses I want to talk about are the vestibular sense and proprioception, not commonly considered to be among the top 5 senses that we have, but necessary for our functioning. The vestibular sense is basically where our head is in relation to the ground. And so if you've ever used a level, a tool that looks kind of like a ruler, but in it there's a little tube of water with a bubble in it, and you put that on the picture to make sure that the bubble's in the center so that the picture's level. That's basically what we have in our heads. If you look at this picture, last video we talked about the cochlea. Attached to that are these structures here called the semicircular canals. And they're filled with fluid and hair cells. And so basically you can tell when you tilt your head that way or tilt your head this way, that's going to move that fluid around and be perceived about information from your brain will perceive where your head is in relation to the ground. And that helps us keep our sense of balance. So you know, if you've ever done this when you were a kid, I'm sure everyone did, you just spin around real fast in circles and then stop. And so when you stop, that fluid is still spinning around the circles in the semicircular canals, but your eyes are telling you you're stopped. And that mismatch makes you very dizzy and typically you fall over. So that's the vestibular sense. Proprioception is another putting together in our brain where the parts of our body are. So if you think about, like, if I close my eyes and put my hand out here, I can still tell that my fingers are, you know, just a couple feet away from my face. That's proprioception. There have been cases documented where people have damage to their brain that if they can't see their limbs, they have no idea where their fingers, toes, arms, legs are. And they actually just collapse in a dark room. So we need that proprioception to know where to reach and grab for things too. So 2 other senses you don't normally think about, but I wanted to draw your attention to. The next 2 senses I want to talk about are called the chemosenses. There's a reason they call them chemosenses, and that is because they rely on chemicals. So you take basically the breakdown of chemicals is going to then create a chemical reaction, which leads to transduction and the brain perceiving taste and smell. So first with taste, unlike rods and cones and the hair cells, everyone knows what the receptors are for taste. They're the taste buds. And it used to be thought they were distributed at particular spots on the tongue. They're not. They're spread all over. There used to be thought there were about 4 different types of taste buds, and those were sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. And you can kind of consider taste as a regulatory system for the body, that we need to have sweet receptors because that sugar that we have, that's the food for the brain for the neurons to fire. So you need that. And so sweet, if we don't have enough blood sugar, we can't even think straight. Salty is for our muscles. We need the sodium and the chloride, basically responsible for all these muscle movements that we have. And so if we're running low on salt, again, our body detects that and says, get salt. Bitter is usually some indication of some sort of toxicity. So those are just some of the basic ones. And about 11 years ago, a 5th taste bud was identified called umami. And that is for like kind of cheesy and meaty flavors. MSG, monosodium glutamate, is that's basically the primary receptor for that. So if you use MSG on food, that's stimulating your umami receptors. Other ones that research is being done on are for calcium, the metallic taste of blood. I think that's kind of fascinating. Fatty acids and starch. So if you look at your tongue in the mirror, you have about 200 taste buds. And then if you look at a picture of it, these little taste buds then, basically you're chewing up food, the saliva in your mouth breaks down the chemical compounds of the food into subsequent molecules. Those start to like fall down into those taste buds, and then they can stimulate the individual taste buds inside those pores. That's being sent as information to the brain about what's in your mouth. Now, if you think about what your favorite foods are, you think, so, I can taste more than 5 different flavors. And that's because your taste, your sense of taste, combines with your sense of smell, which is another chemosense. And those two things together allow us to experience all the flavors that we can experience, which is important because, I mean, I love food. Also, one other thing about taste buds, some people are what are called super tasters, and they'll have tons of taste buds on their tongue. And so they're very sensitive to any slight variation in a flavor. Also, with alongside these taste buds are pain receptors that go along with each taste bud. And so when you eat hot sauce, the little barbs in the chemical makeup of the hot sauce stimulates those pain receptors next to the taste buds. And so if you don't have as many taste buds, you also don't have as many pain receptors, and you can eat really, really hot food in terms of spicy. So some people are super tasters, some people are non-tasters, and they don't taste much. I'm in more of that category. When I go to get a bag of Doritos, I look for the side with the most powder and put it like tongue side down because I need to stimulate the few taste buds I have. Okay, so like I said, our sense of smell combines with our sense of taste to allow for all these different flavors. Now, this is one that has an unusual name for the receptor. It's called the olfactory bulb. Our sense of smell is also known as olfaction. And we have about 1,000 different types of receptors. And so I'm going to show you this picture here. If you look, I'm moving the cursor in the photo. If you breathe in like you got pizza in front of your face, inhale deeply, that pulls those airborne molecules of that stimulus up into your sinus cavities, and then hanging down in the top of your sinus cavity are the fibers from this olfactory bulb. And these then, basically what you have happen, and to the right is an actual electron microscope picture of what these receptors look like. 1,000 different types. You're going to have these molecules melt into the mucus because you have mucus in your nose, and then make a chemical bond with the 1,000 different types of receptors you have there. So that information then all is collected by by the olfactory bulb, which is basically almost like your auditory nerve or your optic nerve, and sends information directly to your limbic system. So it's kind of strange. The only sense that bypasses the thalamus and goes directly to the emotional center of our brain is our sense of smell. And you can imagine how critical that is. I mean, babies can instantly recognize the smell of their moms. And I mean, our sense, I'm sure you've been transported in time when you smell something from your childhood and you're like, oh God, I remember what that was like. That's because it's going straight to our limbic system where we have our hippocampus, which is our primary memory center. So memories and our sense of smell are intimately related. I said we have 1,000 different types of receptors. We can, and then combine because they work in combination with one another. We can detect as many as 10,000 different odors, which is still significantly less sensitive than like a dog's sense of smell. Right. So together, like I said, our sense of smell and our sense of taste allow us to experience all the flavors. The last sense I want to identify is our sense of touch. And it's a complicated process because it involves a number of different receptors. So we have, because we're mammals, we all have hair on our skin. And then if you look at this picture here, you can see that there are hair receptors that go right up next to the actual hairs on our skin. And so if I press, going to put a watch on or something like that, that's going to bend the real hairs on our skin. But then those hair receptors are going to detect that movement and feel that as pressure against the skin. That's one part of our sense of touch. Another, you can see here, I'm moving the cursor again, these free nerve endings. Those free nerve endings allow us to experience pain when we have a cut or different temperature variations. The last one that I'm just going to identify for today is called the Pacinian corpuscle, which I think is a really Star Trek name. and that detects vibration. So if you look over here, I'm going to move the cursor around. You can see it looks like almost like the end of a green onion with a white little bulb, but like it's deeper within our skin. So when you hear like the throbbing bass of a car, like boom, boom, like that, then that is squeezing those little bulbs, basically sending action potentials to the brain, saying that there are serious air vibrations in the air on the ground close to me. And that's read as information about vibrations, which has been very important, especially as humans evolved and lower mammals, to be able to detect movements of big predators was a big deal in order to survive. Okay, the last thing I want to say about our sense of touch is that we have information being sent about all these pressure to our skin, all that, to the parietal lobe, and that is where the sensory cortex in the brain is. In the sensory cortex, we have a literal picture of the body mapped out. So we can tell when, like, let's see, if your toes are stimulated by touch, a certain part of that parietal lobe will be having action potentials and be red. It's like, okay, that part's being stimulated. And you can also see this varies here in terms of the, how much space in the brain is devoted to what. I mean, you can tell that so much sensory information is being picked up by the fingers and the thumb and the lips and the face. I mean, it's the most sensitive areas of our body. Whereas, like you see here, like this is the word trunk. I mean, that's, you know, a big chunk of your body from your, you know, shoulders into your waist. But then not a whole lot of sensory information is being processed from there because that's not as critical. We need information about our face and also how we're expressing facial expressions too, because that's critical in terms of human survival. And also our fingers, obviously, to manipulate things. So that is our sense of touch. And we did the vestibular and proprioception sense, and taste and smell. I hope this has been helpful.